Hi, I would like to welcome you today to our webinar on increasing your bottom line one process at a time. I am Keith Greeno from Acima Solutions, and what we would like to do today is just review as an overview how standardized process enhancements can greatly help your business. We will be just spending 30 minutes today, so if you do have additional information, please contact us. For the agenda, what we want to talk about is industry issues and how we can actually use business improvements to help solve them. Then we're moving into business system lifecycle, and then talking about why bother. Why do we really want to take a look at improving the processes, and how can it help us improve our bottom line? And then we're going to be dealing with just the how-to. So the how do we actually improve the processes, and what are the processes and steps that we are required to take to make this happen, talking about keys to success, and then some questions at the end. So let's talk about current industry issues. And so this is, all companies certainly go through this, and it's the business system life cycle. And really it's a midlife crisis for all companies. And what they tend to do is kind of go through the business improvements. They take a look at putting in new solutions, and then really they hit a point where they've got it so it kind of works, but they really don't go any further. And so how do we get past that so we actually continue to improve? And so it's a big issue that's out there. All companies go through it. Doesn't matter whether you're nonprofit or you're profit companies. Everybody has this particular issue. And then today, let's talk about the improved productivity. And so the bottom end is that in Canada, we are actually lagging behind many of the other countries in our productivity. And so how can we actually improve that? So as an industry, how do we reduce the procedures that we're doing? How do we make it so that we're lean, so that we really don't do anything unless it adds value to the overall company as a whole? And so how do we automate tasks? I mean, we're doing so many of these manual tasks, and we deal a lot with the oil and gas industry, where in these service industry type stuff, they are doing just a huge amount of manual tasks out there, and a lot of these could be automated where the information would flow much more easily. And again, it kind of relates to this, the elimination of redundant data entry, because data entry itself, I mean, there is absolutely no reason at all that we should ever have to enter data twice. It's a access point for errors, and there's absolutely no value added to that particular process. And so then taking a look at improving performance. And so, you know, a lot of companies where they've got lots of data that needs to be entered into the systems, how do we make that data entry easier? How do we make it so that you guys make less mistakes when you're actually doing it? And so it's another big issue that's out there. How do we solve that? And then faster reporting and processing. And so understanding is that if we do not have reports, what in the heck is the use of the information we're putting in there? Realistically, we need to have better reporting. It needs to be faster, and it needs to be delivered in a format that is available so that we can make decisions, which kind of ties into the next point, which is a big issue, is that being able to improve the distribution of the reports so that not only do we have the faster reporting, as it's talking about above, but actually distributing it to the correct people so that they're able to make the correct decisions when they need to. And then improving the analytical reporting. And this is certainly coming out in the industry now because of the the analytic information which is available on all of these systems. But how do we improve that analytical reporting so we can distill the information down into something that is comprehensible by us poor mortals instead of the computer systems themselves? And then better monitoring of key metrics. Again, it's distilling that information so it gives us something so that it's driving exactly what we want to have happen. Now, as a keynote to that, or a side note, I should say, with key metrics, we've got to be careful because we've got to make sure that these key metrics that we actually are tracking are really driving what we want to drive. Because if we don't, what happens is we end up with supervisors and managers making decisions which are not in the best interest of the overall corporations. Great. Okay, let's talk about the business life cycle and what's this really all about. And so understand, I mean, we start in where we start exploring. Let's start right at the top, and we're exploring a new system. And so you're, as a company, you come back and you say, okay, listen, I've got a problem. I want to solve it. I think new software, I need new processes are going to fix this. So we're going to explore for a solution, and then we're going to go out and buy something. We're going to actually put the thing in. And remember, we go through a lot of pain when you implement these systems because there's process changes. It's the personnel that have to be trained. I mean, there's just a lot of things that go into the implementation of a new system. And so then what happens is we finally get that darn implementation where it's over and we actually got the system so that it's working. I mean, it may not be perfect, but we've got it normalized where people kind of understand what's going on and they can make things work and they've got workarounds. Okay, and we're happy. But this is really where we dive into this midlife crisis. And the bottom end is that just because we're happy and we've got the system working, it doesn't mean it's running anywhere close to being optimal. And so how do we actually move past this? How do we get past this midlife crisis with all companies and organizations and move up where we really start to optimize the overall solution? Lots of companies, I mean, they get in there and they say, okay, I've got, a Great Plains or I've got a Sage system, and boy, I really don't like it. Well, lots of times it is not the software. It is really just us in our midlife crisis where we are not really looking at optimizing and making that system work as effectively as possible. Sometimes we actually have software on hand, but we're not using it. And if the people aren't using it, it becomes useless. And so the bottom end with this stuff, and it's a big issue with all companies, is how do we get past this midlife crisis and actually keep re-reviewing our solution over and over again so that we can optimize it and move up. Okay? So let's move into the next one, which is why bother? Like, why the heck do we even want to bother taking a look at this stuff? And it's because lots of companies are out there, and they feel like there's got to be a better way. You look at your employees, they're doing tasks, they're doing workarounds all the time. You got more spreadsheets than there is photo radar, right? The bottom line is that how do you possibly get past this where you know that you could do it better, but you just don't know what direction and what's the steps to actually make it happen? Because the bottom end is this, is that lots of companies, and this is just from an example of one that we just finished about 2 weeks ago, but the billing process time. And so understanding, these guys were spending 29 days a month just to get their monthly billing out. Well, guess what? In February, that's the full month, but the rest of the time, you're actually just about spending a full month trying to get the billing process done. And putting in process enhancements and automation has sped that up for this particular company from 29 to 2 days. And that is huge. And so look at your own companies. Are you having problems with this, right? Or let's take a look at the improved accuracy of billings and inventory. And so understand, if the billings that you're sending off to your customers are inaccurate, they're complaining. And if they're complaining, they're actually not that happy. And happy customers don't tend to spend as much money with you. The other thing is that you got a customer that phones in and says, hey, do you have this in stock? And you go, oh, yeah, I see I got 4 or 5 of them, right? And you find out you really don't have any in stock. They're unhappy again. And so how do we improve the accuracy of our systems with the billings and the inventory so that we just make it so that our customers are happier? Another big one, like what happens is reduce unbilled services, lost revenue. And so understand, if you're out in the field and somebody's doing a bunch of work or they add some component parts onto a job and they don't record it, right? It never gets recorded, so therefore the revenue is never lost. Your customer comes out there. Do you think that they're actually going to pick up the phone and say, hey, by the way, I see you put this new pump in there and I never got billed for it? No, it doesn't happen. And so the bottom line is it's lost revenue, and that's costing companies lots of times thousands. And then reducing time for costing jobs. And this was a service company that we were doing the work on. But understand is that they were spending just hundreds of hours going back through trying to keep track of exactly what it was costing for jobs, all of the administrative employees spending their time going after the fact trying to accumulate the time and the billings and everything else that was going into through the company so that they would get some kind of a reasonable number that says, okay, I think we made or lost money on this particular project or job. But if you look at the bottom, this was the bottom line savings and benefits that was calculated for this particular company, $386,000, and that was a year. And it was not a large company. This thing was, I think they were running at about 125 employees. And so the number is staggering once you start adding it up on what the ineffective and poor processes are costing you. And so this is really why we want to bother with this stuff. Okay? So let's just go a little bit further. And so there's a great article that was written by the Business Development Bank called the 5 Do's and 5 Don'ts of Successful Businesses. And this was from 2014. But understand is that why bother? 7 out of 10 of the most successful businesses report, right, that they are the first adopters or early adopters of new technology and processes. This is not rocket science, guys. The bottom end is that if we're looking forward and we're actually trying to continually improve, right, this is what causes and this is what generates the most successful businesses, right? They also spend, these companies, 20% more time and resources on trying to identify areas of technology and processes that their business could use to get ahead of the competition. This is why you're getting eaten for lunch sometimes, is because these guys are out there always looking at and saying, hey, can I use this technology, right? Is there anything better? Is there a process that actually can really enhance this? And this all kind of generates down into this last one, which is don't get smacked. And I don't know whether you guys have heard anything about this stuff before, but this social, mobile, analytics, and cloud are reshaping businesses. And so this is going to be critical to any business. This is going to happen not just to certain ones. This is going to happen to everybody, but it's going to take time. But let's just take an example of this particular thing. So let's just take a look at Blockbusters. Anybody know of a Blockbuster video store around anymore? Why? Well, understand the mobile, the social, the information which is coming out of that system. Well, Netflix absolutely ate it up, right? Why? I don't have to worry about it. I pay a small monthly fee. I can get the movies anytime I want. I can download it off the internet in the cloud. So really, these guys got smacked. And the understanding is this, is that take a look at your own businesses. Just because, okay, I'm not in the Blockbuster business, right? And Netflix is not my my particular competitor. The point is what is it going to happen to other businesses? Okay, what's going to happen out in the industry now with regards to the social? And so there was a large consulting firm called George May that was out of Chicago. And those guys, they had a particular thing where they did these reports all of the time, but the problem is what they did is they went in and did a review and they copied the report from one to the other. And the bottom end is that the social media came up and those guys were gone within 6 months. And so this thing is going to be affecting all of the companies. Analytics. So understand now with the inventory systems, you can actually get full analytics coming out of it with a web-based solution which ties into your accounting system, which helps you with the advice on inventory stocking and when you should be keeping it and not keeping it, and what kind of information you should be doing to help you with business decisions. So the bottom end, guys, is that understand is that why bother? Because if you don't bother, you're going to get smacked and you may be out of business and you don't see it coming. And the point is what we want to do is make it so that you guys are looking and making sure that you see it coming. Great. All right. So let's talk about just how do you do it, right? How do we do this process to improve? And understanding that we need to standardize it at least a little bit, because you're saying, well, gee, it's a process of a process. But yes, the bottom line is we have to standardize it to make sure that we're doing this on a consistent basis. Because as we saw back there with the why bother, right, the 20% are spending more time and money going out and looking at the processes. And this is what we're trying to do, is make you guys and move you up into that 20% where you're more likely to be successful as companies. Okay, so apply some structure and basic project management techniques to your processes because it's really going to help you stay on track, right? You really need to take a look and do this stuff consistently, minimum annually, right? Is sit down and say, where are we at? What's coming on the market? How is it going to affect our business? Or how is it going to affect our competition? Or how is it going to affect our customers? And perhaps vendors. But focus on solving issues that have the most impact on your business. And so take a look and just say, okay, what are our processes? Where are we spending most of our time, right? Why are we spending most of our time doing that? Because what we want to do is focus on these areas Because if you try to solve everything, you're going to be what is that? I believe it's a farmer saying that says is that I become a good at many things but a master of none, and you don't want to be doing that. So we want to focus. So the other thing is enlisting the right people on your team, and this is one of the other things that came out of that study from the Business Development Bank with the 5 do's and the 5 don'ts. And it's talking about, making sure you got the right people on your team. And if you don't, make sure that you go out and get outside help, because most time it is a critical key success factor in your success. And the reason why is this, is that lots of us get up to our neck in alligators in the swamp, and we forget that we're in the swamp to drain it. But the outside advice can come in and take a look at it, and they are very objective. They don't have to get all of the personal information which is coming out and the personalities and the history that's happened. And so they can point you in the right direction lots of times much faster than we would come to that same understanding. So how do we improve? And really becomes this process again. It's a wheel which is a continuous re-review of your systems. And so where do we start? Is start with the understanding. We need to sit down and say, okay, I have to understand where we are and where we are going, right? What is the vision? What are your goals? Are you looking to expand into multiple markets? Are you looking to try to do something in China? Are you really trying to move your company forward? Or are you just happy being a smaller company and you just want to be the best in Southern Alberta or in Northern Alberta? It doesn't matter. But you need to take a look at your current processes and what you're doing right now. And then moving into the diagnostic or the diagnosing of your systems, look at the actual place where people work. Take a look at what's actually happening with your field consultants. Take a look and see what's happening with your distribution or your warehouse employees. What are they really having as far as pain, as far as getting their work done? And what kind of waste is coming out of that? If you can see that somebody's doing processes 2 or 3 times, or they're having to write something down 2 or 3 times, or you can see they're having to move from one system to another to get it done, this is where we start diagnosing and figuring out what the heck people are really doing. And the best place to do this is really right out at the grinding edge where it's actually happening. And then we want to sit back and take a look at this stuff and just analyze, right? And say, okay, listen, I understand that these guys are doing the process 3 times, or I can understand that the billing process is late by 29 days, right? Why? The question is why? And what is really happening that is causing that? Is it because we're doing billing funny, or is it because we've got 28 different price lists? Is it because our inventory is all manual and we have to rekey this stuff all manually and put it in, and we're retyping invoices 3 times before we actually enter it into the system? But this analytical process is really taking a look at what technology and management best practices are out there. What can we use to solve the particular issues that are happening in step 2? And so once we get into this, we sit down and we make a list and we prioritize the issues. I mean, we just list the stuff and say, hey, here's all of the problems where this analytical stuff is happening. And then what we do is we say, okay, if we solve the problem, if we can really get rid of that issue, right, what kind of a benefit would we get out of it? How much would we save? If we take a look and say, okay, listen, there's 3 people doing the invoicing right now, right? Somebody's doing it manually, somebody else is doing another process. Then once this is all being done, it moves over to something else. If we could eliminate all of that stuff and just move it from the particular person, so one person generates the invoice coming out of the information coming out of your project costing or job costing system, what would that save? And so once we've come up with at least some estimates of what the savings are in this prioritization step, right, now we can really focus, because what it gives you is a capability of saying, well, the biggest value would be fixing this problem first. Okay? And so once we've got this prioritization done, it gives us that focus to develop a plan and design a system to solve the big problems first, right? And so that's moving into the next step, which is develop a plan, which is always the best thing. Don't do anything until you actually know where the heck you're going, right? And so this recommendations on how to proceed and coming up with something which is measurable, right? And so we base it on value. So the prioritization step where we've got the benefits to the customers, we base the whole plan based on the value we're going to get, and then we create measurable results. So we say, if we fix this, we should be able to reduce one person down, and this processing should be done over here. And then once we've done the implementation step, we want to go back and look at the results and say, did we actually achieve what we wanted to do? Because this implementation is really the start of doing. This is where you really put it to the road and say, let's fix this process. And now we start all over again and say, okay, that's a value or progress, and move forward where we move back to the understanding. Okay? So it really becomes this full circle of how to do this stuff. And lots of times having an outside person taking a look and helping you with these particular processes can certainly help clear your vision a little. So let's just talk about briefly some processes and what's going on. And so just an example of this, and I don't want to get into too much detail on it, but just to give you an understanding. And so if you look at this, I mean, this particular company, what they were doing is employee time, employee charges, equipment charges. This was happening out in the field. They were doing manual daily activity reports, right? Sometimes this was on a laptop, and lots of times it was just on Excel spreadsheets, right? So this was all being faxed in, so they had to print it or fax it and send it off to the head office so that they would actually do timesheets. And then, but this daily activity report was being approved, and so there was an approval step here. Then it moved over, and the company actually had a whole bunch of admin people preparing the timesheets, and this was done again in another Excel summary sheet. So we've got Excel here, we've got Excel here, Then what happens is then, so this was being approved. So now another staff admin person was having to review all of this information which was being done. It was approved again, right? If it was done correctly, right? Then we move down into, yes, we do. So now we prepare timesheets in the accounting system. This was the old ACPAC system back then. It's the Sage 300 now. But the bottom end is that, so then they would re-enter this information from here into a spreadsheet or into the accounting system where they would actually prepare the payroll. They do a pre-check register. The pre-check register now goes for another approval step where all of the approval and the rates and everything else that were entered in here were done. And then this thing would actually generate the payroll. On the other side of it, you see you're doing another time entry sheet, and the daily activity reports are all being, photocopied in that, and then there's another approval step to make sure that this billing is all done. So understand, we're doing, in this particular process, there's 4 approval steps, tons of reentry, a whole bunch of stuff being done where there's no value being added. And so let's just go to the next slide. And so understanding, this is what happened when we automated as many processes as was economically justifiable. And what I mean by that is there was a cost benefit. The cost to fix this thing was like $10,000, and the savings for these guys was in the $50,000 range. Okay? But the reason for that is that all of this stuff is coming down. There was one major approval step happening with the system, and then instead of anything else having to be re-entered, right, it was going into a time tracking system, which went straight into the project costing system, which went straight into the customer invoicing. And so once this started happening, you see invoicing was coming straight out of the system. There was no re-entry. The time was exactly the same thing that was approved up in this time entry step. So the payroll was coming straight out of here. So once you did time tracking, it went over to the payroll automatically, no reentry. So you don't need to recheck the time because there was nothing happening. It was all being approved one time. And all of the other reports that were having to be required were all generated straight out of the system. And it was guaranteed that they had to balance because it was exactly the same info. Okay? Does that make sense? I mean, do you guys understand that what we're talking about doing is just taking it because if you go back to this one, it's process, approval, 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 and on this one, it is only one approval step, and everything is flowing through one central repository where it goes to all of the other information systems that you guys need. Okay? So let's just go through a little bit more on this process enhancement because this gets bigger. And so what we try to do with a lot of our customers is really give them a roadmap, again, for process enhancement. And so these things need to be looked at all of the time. And so this particular company, again, you've got electronic timesheets, you've got service management for them. We're talking links to payroll. But understand, as you get bigger, there's value in actually doing human resource systems, right? But again, it's the low-hanging fruit, and you got to get the big wheels working first. And so this is what you saw, but understand this needs to be looked at continually to determine whether human resource software is a big thing. Any company that's got more than 100 employees, really a human resource system will pay for itself within a year. But understand we've got to get the main systems working first before we can ever take a look at it. Also, customer relation management systems are something that add a lot of value to a lot of companies. But again, you may not be able to do it right off the bat, but understand it needs to be there. And so what we build is we build a roadmap which has got this overall processing flow. And the stuff that's in green and the stuff that's in blue are really processes, whether it's third-party or modules, but these are things that need to be implemented now. And then what we do is we put on the roadmap these other things that should happen in the future, and we need to keep taking a look and finding out where the lowest hanging fruit, where the biggest benefit to the company is. Okay? So let's just discuss then, if we're talking the processes. And so understand what we're doing is we're doing this whole review and everything, but what are the keys to success for these reviews? And so it's really this clear and concise documentation. We need a firm listing on exactly what the issues are and what the problem areas are by individual. And so what you do is you make sure that you write down the key issues as you're discussing it with each one of the various employees. And you put it by the individual so that you can go back and refer to it, because what you will find lots of times is that a issue for an employee is being caused by somebody else trying to solve a problem, right? And so this is where you need to look at it from a global point of view. And so if you put all of your issues down and make sure that you're documenting them by the individual, you can make sure where there's a conflict, and then we solve the conflict by a compromise of some point. Once we've got that done, we really want to take a look and do a process map like we did those other maps, except for your existing processes. You know, it's talking about where we're here. This is the existing processes, and it shows you. And you can really highlight where the problem areas are because of all of these review and approval steps, right? And you can highlight, if you want, the Excel being done here, Excel being done here. And once you've done that, it makes it easier to define, you know, and get your processes done. So what we want to do is start with a process flow chart for your existing processes, and then we want to take a look and focus at the issues that we've got up above and what are the potential benefits and savings of solving them, right? Why are you actually doing it? And if there's no value added, then what we want to do is eliminate that. So the same process flow that we're talking about is taking a look at the benefits. And so if you look at these two process flows that we talked about before, you compare this one to this one. This one is much more streamlined. And so there's a bunch of benefits that come out of it. And the benefits are, okay, I don't have to have the approval times. How much time does it take to prepare those spreadsheets? And so those are all of the calculations that go into determining, right, these potential benefits that can come out of your system. And again, this is where a third party can certainly help you with that, because, I mean, like I say, you get into it where you've got the eyes that are much clearer because you don't have all of the history and the personalities involved that you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then what you do is you do a process flow map with the new processes as we showed there, which is streamlined, and it just reduces down by a whole lot of complexity into something which is easily understandable by anybody. And so keys to success, making sure that we document this stuff as fully as possible. And then after that, what we want to do is move to this clear accountability and timetable, because it's, okay, we've got to assign responsibility to the individuals for that improvement. So if you've had in that timesheet collection and payroll, if you had people that are involved in the HR function, you want to assign who's the individual that's responsible for doing it, so that you can hold them accountable. Because if you hold people accountable, that's when you really start driving things forward. And then the next thing is making sure that you assign the required deliverables and due dates. If you don't put a due date on it, if you don't say, listen, I need to have such and such a process in place by end of July, right, then it tends to never happen. And so this is this measurable type stuff, but you need to do it for projects as well. So understand this is a critical thing. If you skip past this, then the projects tend to never ever get done because it's always in someone's best interest not to make it happen, and they will fight as much as they can to not improve it. Okay, so let's talk about the solutions, right? Keys to success. And so once you've got it, you say, okay, listen, I think we've got a solution to fix this thing. Really, we have to make sure to be successful, we have to have senior management buy-in and commitment. Because if the senior management is not bought into improving the process, and someone comes up and starts complaining about something, because everybody is affected by change, and we have to understand that. And so as long as senior management understands the benefits they're going to get out of it, and they can drive this thing forward, because if they say, don't worry about it, they don't need to do it, or we'll use this as an exception, then you throw a wrench in the gears and everything stops. The next major thing is this, is that companies need to accept that the responsibility for improvement is clearly theirs. If they don't want to improve or they don't push forward to improve, they will never improve. And they become the blockbusters of the past where all of a sudden they are just completely out of business. And then another critical step is companies need to plan and set goals. They need to provide the appropriate feedback. And so in this is that don't just dive forward. Make sure that you've got the plan, as we were talking about in that wheel. Make a plan, set the goals, what are the measurables, and then move forward. And then you have to understand the last one here is that there's a huge impact on the organizational culture. If you try to bring in technology to a company that just does not want technology. I mean, we were dealing with a company a while back. The owners were in their 70s. And so, you're talking to the owners, and they basically said, listen, yeah, it's all right. Go ahead and fix the system if you want to. They said, but I don't ever want to see anything about it. I just want this kind of report, and it's going to be in paper every time. That organization, is likely going to be a drag as far as trying to make the most enhanced technology available. They cannot use it. And so they're going to have to be a little bit behind that the other companies with regards to it, just because of the ownership that's there. And so the organizational culture has a huge effect and impact on making these projects successful. And so that's the end of it. I just wanted to have any questions if you want. And so I appreciate your time and look forward to having you again on another webinar.